Okay, so as I'm Sarah Martin, and I'll be presenting with Sharon Blum-Caon, my colleague. So we're both in the Estuaries and Environmental Water team at the Corangamite CCMA. We're a staff of now about 50 people who work across many different programs in the region, and I'm sure you've heard about some of them already. But one of our key responsibilities, even though we're a little bit biased, is delivery of water for the environment in our region. So successful delivery of water for the environment requires a lot of careful planning, a lot of data, and it can be a challenge to communicate this to the public in an engaging way, which is why Sharon and I have developed this tool and launched it a couple of months ago. So to explain a bit more about water for the environment, I'll hand over to my colleague Sharon to talk about some of the data and communication challenges that we face that inspired us to develop this tool.
Thanks, Sarah. So look, I was just going to start off with talking a little bit about what water for the environment is, because I know we've got a mixed range of backgrounds today. So water for the environment is, just very briefly, it's water that's either held in a reservoir and released or taken in and out of a river to support the ecology of the system. So the ecology of the river or a wetland, especially in highly extracted systems. So we have 3 environmental water entitlements in Corangamite. And if you have a look at the map there on the slide, you can see the Moorabool River, the most easterly one there. So we have an entitlement in Lau Lau Reservoir, which you can also see on the map there. Thanks, Sarah. And we release water as low flow or pulses of water from Lau Lau to help support the ecology of the Moorabool River. So on the Moorabool, flows are less predictable than, say, on the Barwon. So we have a lower confidence in the availability of environmental water for that system. So we can only release the water if we've got it and there's sufficient in our bucket, if you like, at Lau Lau Reservoir. It's a highly stressed system, excuse me. So it only has about 25% of what it needs for ecological function. So if we don't get nice winter spring flows like we have this year, then we really can't tick off all the flow recommendations for the Moorabool. So it's quite an interesting system. We rely on transfers that Barwon Water do between Lau Lau Reservoir and She Oaks to help support summer flows. And we've got some particular issues along the river. There's a lot of fish barriers on the Moorabool, but in particular down at Batesford, we've got an area where the Moorabool River was rerouted around the quarry there a couple of times, and some of the old concrete section there has broken up, creating more fish barriers, and also the water disappears from those pools in low flow situations to ground, and we can end up with a fish kill event there if we're not careful. And we have had to go down there and save fish. So just trying to give you a sense of the flavour for the system. We've recently done some investigations down there that are feeding into integrated water management and sustainable water strategy processes to hopefully get some better flows for this system. Our other river entitlement is the Barwon. So from West Barwon Reservoir in the Otways down through to Geelong and below. So that's a relatively new entitlement, 2018, and how we release that water is informed by a flow study that was completed last year. Again, it's a highly flow stressed system. So that flow study, to give you a feel for it, says that you need 29 gigalitres of water to get the Barwon back to 75% of natural flow. We've only got a gigalitre. So we have to use it very judiciously, and we tend to just do that over summer. Because one of the good things about the Barwon is it does tend to have reliable flow through winter and spring, unlike the Moorabool. So that water's pretty much put down the upper branches, and you can't really tell its effects much further downstream than Winchelsea. And one of the sort of associated issues with the Barwon is that because of that dam being there since the 1960s, the upper reaches have pretty much shut down. So because of the lack of flow, they've become choked with weeds, they've got poor channel form, and now when you put water down them, it really struggles. So, you know, hand in hand with getting more water for the Barwon, we're going to need to address those issues, because there's no point fixing the weeds without the water to then maintain the channel, and vice versa. The third formal entitlement in Corangamite is the Lower Barwon wetlands down the bottom there. So unlike the river entitlements, the water for this entitlement is taken in and out of the Barwon River itself. So the ecology down at Reedy Lake and Hospital Swamps, which were the two wetlands there above Lake Conowari, evolved before European settlement in response to natural wetting and drying cycles. So what we try to do down there is recreate those wetting and drying cycles to maximise a diversity of habitats down there for all species. So it's quite a difficult space at times, because it's a Ramsar listed wetland of international significance, but it's also a game reserve, and it's also home to a couple of eel fishing licenses. So we have a very diverse community down there, and it can be tricky navigating that at times. We also have a couple of informal environmental entitlements, but I won't go into them too much, except to say we have some discharge from the Ballarat South Waste Treatment Plant down the Yarrawee Lee. We have a disused water source at Pankalack, which we can put down that system at Aries Inlet. And also up on the Mirrabul, where that quarry issue is, the quarry does actually pump that water that collects in the bottom of the pit back to the Mirrabul a bit further downstream, which is really important to maintain its flow at the confluence with the Barwon. So that's a super quick overview, and happy to take questions at the end. But just moving on with communication about environmental water. So in the past, it's been systematic in terms of whenever we do a release, so we might change the low flow level, or we might send down a pulse of water to trigger an ecological response, then we'll email out to our advisory committee for that system. So each entitlement actually has its own environmental water advisory committee, and we consult with them on planning, related projects, and we let them know whenever we're doing something on the system. We've recently broadened that out to a broader notification list, which you can sign up to from the website. And the other way, I guess, is word of mouth. So a lot of the people on these individual committees represent a group. So it might be People for a Living Mirrabul, it might be the Upper Barwon Land Care Network. I saw Sarah was with us today. It might be Geelong Gun and Rod, and those representatives then go back to their groups and help disseminate information. Comms and engagement team, they obviously, not so much during COVID, but in the past have done social media releases and website news as well. Next slide, thanks Sarah. So what we really wanted though was a systematic real-time tool that the community could easily access, so like a first port of call. We really wanted the data to be easy to maintain, and we wanted it to have a visual context. So one of the wonderful things about this tool is that you can see the rivers on those maps moving through the landscape, and then you can click in at different points and see what the water's doing, and start to get a feel for how, say, water releases from Lau Lau play out down the Mirrabul over time. So you can see what's released from the reservoir, and you can see the natural flow at a given point on the river, which will be a combination of natural flow and that release. So you can start to get a feel as a community member for things like, you know, winter natural flow on the Barwon, where the river is gaining downstream. That's how rivers should operate. As all the tributaries come out, the flow in Winchelsea should be higher than the flow at Birragurra, which should be higher than the flow at Forest. But in summer, in a flow stress system, what you'll see is a pulse of water coming from the reservoir and actually attenuating as it comes down, decreasing in volume and flow rate as it comes down. So it's a really good tool for starting to get a feel for that. A lot of the gauges also, as well as flow, they have other parameters like dissolved oxygen, temperature, salinity. So again, by looking at those kind of parameters, community members can start to see the relationship between flow and water quality. So if flows are low, you might expect to see low dissolved oxygen and high temperature, for example. So you start to get a feel for what the flow means to the river. we're hoping this will build community trust. So we're not just making numbers up. This data is coming straight from the gauges via the WMIS site. And also it's accessible anywhere, anytime. So rather than, if somebody wants to find out what's happening on their river at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night because their back paddock's starting to go under, they can go onto our tool, have a look at the flow, have a look at if any releases have been made, and see what's going on. So it's really good for that, anywhere, anytime. And it's also fun. I apologise, I'm a nerd. I find these things fun, but you can go in there, you can create graphs, you can hone in on different little time periods or different parameters, and it's really quite fun to use as well. So yeah, we're hoping it'll be a good thing, and Sarah is going to talk a bit more about the detail and give us a go. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sharon. That was fantastic. So yeah, we'll jump into the tool in a minute, but I just wanted to explain what the data sets are that make up the tool. So we've got basically 3 data sets. So we've got, and thank you to Discover AI who created the tool for us and supplied this diagram. So we've got static, what we're calling permanent data. So we can change this. It's a bit of a manual process, but we can change this, but generally it stays the same. So we've got our maps of each system. We've got some site photos at some of the gauges, and then the gauges themselves, their location. We can add and remove gauges. We haven't done that yet, but we do have the capability to do that, which is really important. I think there's a new gauge possibly coming in the Upper Barwon at some point in the future. So So we've also got the live data. So this is from the Victorian Government website, Water Management Information System. That's what WMIS stands for. So this was a key part of the tool, to have that live data. So that website is publicly accessible. Anyone can go and have a look at it, but we wanted to integrate it into our tool so that people can come to our website and interact with it, with also our custom data, which Sharon updates monthly. So this is our releases, past and future. So let's jump in and have a play. And reshare my screen. So I've taken us straight to, can everyone see that? Can you see that, Sharon?
Yep.
Yeah. So I've taken us straight to where the maps are, but I might actually go back to the homepage just to show you how to get here. It's pretty easy. So you can go through what we do, or you can just scroll down to the what we do section here. It's under waterway management, and then water for the environment, and then river flows, water quality, and environmental releases, or also clicking on that large map that was up the top. So back to where we were before. So we've got 3 maps in here. So we've got the Upper Barwon, Lower Barwon wetlands, and the Moorabool. I'm just on a laptop, so my screen's a bit small, so I'm just scrolling up and down there. But so all of these gauges here are clickable and live with that interactive data. So we'll click on the Morrison's gauge at Moorabool. So you get an initial little tooltip that pops up. It's just extracting the latest data this is from WMIS. So you can just look at that and close out of it, or you can go into it and go, I want to have more of a look at that. So you click on more information and it will bring up this larger window. So most of the gauges have similar information. So we've got up here, the default on the river gauges is water for the environment, which is the data that Sharon enters, or stream flow. But you can also have a look at water level, conductivity, temperature on this one. The other ones have slightly different parameters. So I'll just leave it on the water for the environment stream flow, and we'll have a look at the graph in a sec. But you can also have a look, this is where the actual gauge is on Google Maps. So you can actually go into Google Maps from our website and have a little play with that. So we'll go down to the charts, which is what Sharon and I get really excited about. And so we can customize the dates here. So you can go just last month, you can go last 3 months, last 12 months, or custom. So we're going to go custom. And we're going to go back about a year. So I'll go from the 4th of November to the 4th of October, and we'll have a look at that data. So you just go apply, Just wait for it to load. So what it's bringing in here is the streamflow data from the WIMIS, the Victorian Government website, and it's also bringing in the water for the environment data, which Sharon has uploaded to the system. So Sharon, do you want to talk through, we'll zoom into, you can zoom into little sections like this.
Yeah, well,
have a little chat about that.
Yeah, so we can chat about that one. That's our February fresh. You can actually see, so blue is the total stream flow. So that's a combination of passing flow and environmental releases and any water that might have come in from a tributary. But in the case of the Moorabool, it's also including that transfer from Barwon water at that time of the year from Lau Lau to She Oaks, which really helps us get some decent flow down the Moorabool between those 2 points. So you can see that it's sitting at about, 25-ish up to 40 megalitres a day there. And the dark green is actually what we're releasing. So during that period, before we get to the little fresh there, the period before that, we've got good flow at Morrison's, but we're still releasing a bit because what we're really trying to do is get some water past She Oaks down through the Batesford Reach as well. So, that nice flow of 25 to 40 or so is going to disappear at She Oaks, and a little bit will flow over the top and carry on down the river to the confluence. So that's kind of a brief description of our low flow, I guess, in summer. And then you can see there in February, peaking at around the 9th or 10th of February, that's a pulse of water we put down. And Hamish at Central Highlands Water, who's here with us today, organises all of that, and basically he'll take off any passing flow and so forth so we can conserve environmental water. And what we were trying to do there was hit a peak of 60 megalitres a day. You can see that's what we asked for, and we ended up with about 65 or so megalitres a day for 5 days over February. And that's a particular fresh designed for triggering the spawning migration of short-finned eels, for example. So whenever we do a pulse of water, it's got a number of benefits, but often it's, in particular, it's related to an ecological response from a fish species. So yeah, so that's that one. If you zoom out again, Sarah, you can see a little one there in March that we did. That was more to water fringing vegetation because we had enough water to do that. Sometimes we won't do that because we won't have enough water. We also did one in April and May, and that was for downstream spawning migration of the endangered grayling. And then we did a little one in winter as well there, and sometimes these, I mentioned before, the winter and spring ones, we don't always have enough water for, and if we don't get the natural flow, they don't always happen, which is a bit of a problem because the winter-spring pulses of water are required for upstream migration of juveniles. So those summer ones, they're spawning downstream. The winter and spring freshers, the juveniles are coming back up to complete the life cycle. So we did get that little one in there. And then you can see towards September, October, things started getting nice and wet. And we had a lovely, that's just a natural peak there. You can see the dark green doesn't go up at all, which shows that we didn't do anything different to our base flow there. That was a natural event, which got up to over 100 megalitres a day, which was fantastic. And further on, we took it out of this time grab because it was throwing out the axis. But I don't know if you want to quickly go to that.
Yeah. I've just changed it back to 12 months. That'll show the I think it was over 1,000.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Around, I think it was early October, Hamish will correct me if I'm wrong, Lau Lau was full for the first time in, 4 or so years, which means that all the flow coming in was spilling beautifully over the top and creating lots of lovely natural pulses in the river further down. So it makes people like me very happy. And you can see that we got up over 1,000 megalitres a day there, which is fantastic. And that, that satisfies another ecological requirement of the river. So yeah, so that's an example of a river one. We might go to Hospital Swamps and have a look at that, Sarah.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say, we've configured this so that you can go back about 12 months. If you want to go further, you can click on this little link here and it'll take you to the WIMIS site for this particular gauge. So you can explore all the data that's through WMIS, but I think last 12 months is probably the most useful. So we'll go over to the lower bar one. Oop, wrong way. And we'll have a look at hospital swamps.
So these systems are a bit different, obviously, because it's not about megalitres a day. It's all about the level in the wetland. So
happy with the 12 months there, Sharon?
Yeah, that's fine. So at hospital swamps, we fill it up to nominally about 0.5 over winter, and we partially draw down the wetland over summer to create that wetting and drying cycle, to make sure that we're supporting all the vegetation types, getting muddy margins for the migratory birds and things like that. So you can see there that we started, that would have been the start of the drawdown in early December 2019, and you can see the water level dropping there. And then probably about March 13 is where we started trying to fill it up a little bit. It's a bit of a funny year because City Greater Geelong were building the Sparrowvale wetland, and we actually ended up having to shut off the inlet to hospital swamps so that it could dry out and they could do some works down there. So there's a few funny adjustments in there that might not normally be there in a typical year. But you can see that the water level came up over 0.5 anyway, and that's generally down there, particularly because the infrastructure for stormwater diversion hasn't been completed yet. A lot of the surface water runoff when you get a local rainfall event all ends up in hospital swamps anyway. So you can see that, and we don't have a whole lot of control over that. So we were up over 0.5, but that's nice. That's where it should be through winter. And then you can see around September this year, that's quite normal too. It'll spike up, to 0.7, 0.8. With, again, stormwater, spring surges of water, it'll flush out the wetland, and that's all good for the ecology as well. And we really can't do much about that because, once that water's flowing in from very local urbanised areas at the moment, we don't have a lot of control over that. But yeah, that's an example of a wetland. So hopefully there you can see the drying cycle, partial drying over summer, and you can see a nice full wetland over winter, and that's what we plan to do. So yeah,
lovely.
About it from me, Sarah.
Yeah, so I'll just go back to the slides. I think we're nearly done. We're just going to talk about what we are planning to do next, which is do a similar tool for our estuaries. See that? Yeah, so we're just working on at the moment. We've had great feedback on the environmental water tool from our advisory groups. It's been live for a couple of months now, and the next step is where I'm going to develop a similar tool for the estuaries. So we've got 4 gauges along the estuaries, and we've also got some citizen science data with some fluke posts, which is photo point monitoring, and lots of estuary watch sites along the coast. So that will be launched before the end of the year. So it's very exciting, and I think we're almost out of time, so we might move on to questions.
Thanks, Sarah. I haven't seen any in the chat box, I don't think. Has anybody, would they like to put their hand up if they've got a question? Roger.
Just a quick one. I'm in Aries Inlet, and the Painkalack Creek, well, it doesn't concern me, but I'm very interested in it. I just heard you're going to do estuaries next, but I was on the advisory group for the Painkalack Reservoir, and my understanding is the Bowen Water control what happens there, but I presume it's being done in conjunction with CCMA.
Yeah, are you happy for me to jump in and...
Yeah, I think that's a good one for you, Sharon.
Sarah, jump in if I miss anything more estuary related. But yes, that's one of the informal entitlements I mentioned, Roger. So when the Painkalack Dam stopped being a water supply, as you know, it's still there, it's still maintained. And what we do is we do environmental releases from the Blum-Caon Dam to support the ecology of the freshwater reaches of the river. And also we can use that water to support estuary openings when they have to happen. So, you know, we prefer estuaries not to be open, but when infrastructure is impacted and South Coast Shire make a request, for example, we can support the successfulness of that opening by putting a pulse of water down, which one, oxygenates the water and avoids or mitigates the risk of a fish kill, and two, just provides some flow to keep it open maybe a few days longer than it would have otherwise have been. So, and yes, we work with Barwon Water on that. So we'll talk to them about, you know, can you put the flow up a little bit? Can you put it down a bit? This is what the science says the river needs right now.
You're probably going to cover this in the next estuary development, but how do you handle the flow in from the sea? Because when the estuary was opened, the waves were washing in and there's quite a lot of salt water coming in. How do you account for that in your figures?
Yep. Do you want to tackle that one, Sarah, or?
From the reservoir? Do you
No, from the sea. Because there's quite a lot of salt water washing up over the berm and back in and helping to fill up the creek.
Yeah. I'm thinking out loud here that maybe we should do a webinar on estuaries.
Yep.
Might be some interesting questions there. So sorry, Roger.
I was just saying that's fine.
Yeah. Is there, there's some questions in the chat there, I think.
Will the Barwon estuary be included in the estuary data project you're setting up?
Yeah. So we've got the estuaries all the way from the Curdies to the Barwon. So yeah, the Barwon estuary will be included. Yeah, I think actually the map that I shared was an old version that didn't have the Barwon River on there. So that was that's been fixed up in the new map.
Just to jump in quickly on what Roger asked, though, like that's natural. It's a dynamic system. So estuaries go up and down. They get saltwater intrusion. They have freshwater inputs, and that's their natural state, is to not be steady. So the ecology, again, a bit like the lower Barwon wetlands, has evolved in the context of that variation. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. There, you know, the different species will benefit from different conditions.
Any further comments? Sarah?
Hi everyone. I just not a question, just a comment quickly that that looks great, and it looks like a much more user-friendly way of accessing that data than when I did it last time through the DELP site, I think. So that's great, and I believe the new monitoring stations in the upper Barwon are well underway as far as planning goes. So yeah, hopefully they won't be too far away, which is great. Yeah.
John, Fish. You've got it on mute, John.
The environmental flow that you're allowed, is that carried over? I noticed there was a couple of peaks there where the actual flow was actually the same as the normal flow. Do you actually carry your environmental flows from one year to the next? That was the first question. But the other one was actually there's no water being allowed to leave the Barwon, the Bostock Reservoir into the East Moorabool branch of the Moorabool River, which is an extremely distressed section of the Moorabool River.
Yeah. So just in answer to your first question, it depends on the entitlement, but yes. So for example, on the Moorabool, we've got 7,500 megalitres we can use over a 3-year period. So there can be some variation in what we use each year, as long as we meet that requirement. So that, yeah, it's a bit of we have to keep an eye on that rolling average, I guess. On the Barwon River, we've actually...
No, the Bostock, yeah. So
oh, yeah,
the Bostock Reservoir, there's no actual,
Yeah, there's no environmental entitlement there. So that's really down to the Water Authority and passing flow from Bostock, unless an environmental entitlement was put in place. That's something that might be looked at through the Sustainable Water Strategy. I think that would be the place to probably advocate for that.
Because it's an extremely saline section of the Moorabool River, and where it meets Dolly's Creek, the water's actually being flushed down the West Branch, where it's not coming down from the Lala Reservoir, where it's not coming down the East Branch. Yeah. The water's not being allowed to come down the East Branch,
No,
which is creating this. That's creating the salinity in the actual river. A lot of the saline.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jayden, do you want to answer this one because you're probably closer to this issue than me?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I work with Sharon and Sarah in the Estuaries Environmental Water team. So to answer that question, John, the East Branch is a more naturally salty system, but you are right, it has far less flows. So there are passing flow rules. I was going to say what they are, but look, I'm only 99% sure, so I'll leave that. They're relatively small, and Hamish knows them because I'm looking at his face on the screen right now. Short version is we would love environmental entitlements everywhere, but we've only got them in certain places at the moment. And as Sharon said, there's an opportunity coming up through the Sustainable Water Strategy where these things can be looked at. But I think there is a fundamental difference in salinity due to groundwater connections in the East and West Branch.
Mm-hmm.
Good, thanks for that, Jayden. We're over time. Are there any other questions? If not, thank you, Jayden, for being with us. And we have got Fiona Cumming and Nick Renyard, the board members, are both with us today too. So thank you all very much. Amy, when was the next meeting?
So I'll be sending out some information on Thursday afternoon with some advice about what's coming up next. Just so members know, there's videos on the Community Engagement Network of session 1, and last week's session now is up as well. And we will shortly be getting out the meet and greet session offline. That won't be an online sharing. And as we did last week, I'll send out an email this afternoon with contact details for both Sarah and Sharon and the direct link to the tool that they just shared with you. So as they both said, please have a play, and if you've got particular questions or feedback, I'm sure both Sharon and Sarah would love to hear it.